What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero and Judd Zulgad across the street from Winter Park on Wednesday, where Judd, believe it or not, the Minnesota Vikings are preparing for a win-and-in situation in Week 17.
And I'm still trying to get my head around this. Honestly, when they beat Houston on Sunday, I sort of realized what this game on this coming Sunday would mean. And seriously, for 2 days, I had trouble wrapping my head around the fact that the team I thought would win 4 games all season long is in a situation where not only can they make the playoffs, but they control their own destiny. It is really, if you think about what's happened with this Vikings team, from Peterson, from going from 3-13, it's been a remarkable season. If they lose Sunday, Tom, it's been a success. I mean, we've said that before, but really now it's been a success.
It's a huge opportunity to get into the postseason, to win 10 games, to go 4-2 in the division, which I think was maybe the most difficult thing to believe in all this. I mean, I thought that they would win somewhere in the 5 to 8 game range. I thought that that was a reasonable expectation for them after going 3-13 last season.
Right.
They've already taken one step beyond that and being able to get to 9 wins, to put themselves in this sort of a position. There's another good opportunity for a young team to get some experience, too, playing in a hugely high-profile game, because as much as they've been around the playoff picture throughout the season, I think a lot of people, especially nationally, have looked at this team and just said, well, they're one of those teams that's probably going to fall off over the course of the season. We've seen it around the league. Look at the teams that drafted at the top of the draft last year. Indianapolis is in the playoffs. Washington may be in the playoffs. The Vikings may be in the playoffs, too.
But the difference there is the Colts got a quarterback who's obviously very good. The Redskins traded up to get a quarterback who's obviously very good. The Vikings still have all types of question marks about their quarterback situation. Now, Matt Khalil has been fantastic, but the funny thing is Khalil's a guy we barely talked about because he's been so good. But at every step of the way for the Vikings, we always said, okay, at the next step they're going to fail, right? Wait till the bye week. After the bye week, they're going to fail. Well, what did they do? They were 0-2. Coming out of the bye, they lost at Green Bay, at Chicago, or vice versa, and you said to yourself, okay, this is it. They're done.
I said they had to win one of those 3 games. They beat Chicago to stay in it. The shock to me was
huge. But I'm
huge.
saying, at every step of the way, we always said this is why they're not going to succeed.
Right.
And every step of the way, they proved us wrong, and good for them.
Well, and the things that they've been able to overcome, too. I've said it on these videos now for several weeks running. I think that the coaching staff, if you go back from after that Seattle game, and how many different situations they had where we looked at it and said, okay, this is the week where maybe it comes undone. And I did think that they would beat Detroit at home in that game. I thought they'd beat Chicago at home. I was very surprised by Houston. And look at the things that they've been able to overcome. You do have a young roster. You have some veterans on it as well. But you lose your one viable starting caliber wide receiver, Percy Harvin, for the season in that Seattle game. And you've gotten better from that. You've overcome some weakness in the triangle of your defense, between the nose tackle, between a declining player in Kevin Williams, Jasper Brinkley. Brinkley comes up with a huge play down in Houston, stripping Arian Foster, because that was another chance where you have potentially some momentum. Also combines with Chad Greenway to make that stop on 2nd and goal during the goal line stand. You're getting contributions from guys who we maybe looked at this and said, it's going to be tough for them to get contributions from them. But even more so, they've overcome things. Brandon Fusco had a really rough second half against Houston, but they found ways to scheme around it. They found ways to continue to have productivity. The quarterback makes some throws for you. Guys in the secondary, it's certainly not perfect back there. I mean, they're still undermanned at cornerback, and I think even at safety to an extent, and that you probably need another starting caliber safety in the offseason. But you've won 9 games despite your flaws. That's the mark, to me, of good coaching and of some young players who are perhaps performing beyond their years.
And don't underestimate what Leslie Frazier has done as a stabilizing force. If I was to tell you that the Vikings would be better off by telling Percy Harvin, you know what, Percy, go home. Just get out of here, go home. You'd say, no, that doesn't make sense. 1, you want him on the field. Well, he's not on the field. 2, if he's not on the field, because he's got a year left on his contract, you would like him to be rehabbing at Winter Park. But Les Frazier told Percy, just get out of here. You know what? We can do just fine without you here altogether. That makes no sense.
Well, and
it made perfect sense.
There were discussions about that between the Vikings organization and between Joel Siegel, Harvin's agent, and I don't think that there is no vast conspiracy theory here for why Harvin's gone. There have been other players in the past who have done a similar sort of a thing, but he's not here, and he's a guy who can be emotional and volatile, so if he's not going to be on the field, it probably is best for everyone that he's not around the facility.
But it's just stuff like that Frazier's done since day one. You know, Les goes back to April and a 95% turnout rate for the offseason program, and it's almost gotten cliched and funny now, but that's what he talked about. Go back to when he was hired as the full-time coach in January 2011. What did he talk about? That's pre-lockout. He said, if everybody shows up, what I'm going to get them to do, what Brad Childress didn't get them to do, what I'm going to get them to do is a full buy-in. Well, they couldn't do it because of the lockout. They did it this time, but there's a few key dates for the Vikings. One is when 95% of the guys supposedly showed up for the offseason program. Another is a training camp when he basically sat them down that first night and said, look, nobody thinks you can win. Don't listen to them. Just don't listen to them. We need to take this thing literally week by week. How cliche it is, game by game. It is super cliched, right? The only thing with Frazier is I think he actually got these guys to buy in on a week by week basis. So if you go to Washington and get beat, you know what? Forget about it. It's over. If you go to Seattle and get beat, forget about it. If you come out of the bye 0-2, forget about it. He's done a great job of keeping these guys focused. I'm telling you, the key thing with Frazier is not his ability as a game coach. It is his crisis management ability. When things are going wrong, he's at his best.
Well, and sometimes players just kind of have to get dumb and believe it. You have to look at it. You can't get caught up in the fact that, well, we're 6-6, or well,
right.
whatever they were after the Green Bay game. Can we actually come back from this? They've found ways to be able to continue to push forward here. I give Frazier a lot of credit, and also I give Rick Spielman credit. If you look at some of the things now, we can go pick by pick. Nobody's going to be 100% in their picks, right. And certainly guys who are rookies are young in their NFL careers, but just look back at the impact they've gotten from this draft. Matt Khalil has completely changed the way that they're able to block up front. Harrison Smith has had some ups and downs. I think he went through a rut at midseason. He didn't tackle particularly well, but continues to be a difference maker, played really well in that Houston game. Josh Robinson has struggled. That's one where we're going to have to see how Robinson continues to move forward. He only played 4 snaps in that last game. He's essentially the odd man out. It's been passed by A.J. Jefferson. We go further down the draft. Rhett Ellison, I had one player tell me Rhett Ellison's the best pick we made in this draft because the guy's a solid blocker and they needed somebody to do it. And then we haven't even mentioned Blair Walsh, who's a 6th-round draft pick and right now may be the best kicker in the NFL.
I would say that if John Elway hadn't made the greatest decision of all time to jettison Tim Tebow and get Peyton Manning in so nobody would remember about Tim Tebow and ever, that Rick Spielman actually might deserve some consideration for Executive of the Year given on what he did on that draft. I know the free agency didn't really work. Jerome Simpson's been a bust. John Carlson has as well. But you know what?
But how much did you invest in those guys?
Well, and the key with Spielman to keep in mind is going under the Packer model, he's never going to build through free agency. Free agency is never going to be the key to how Rick Spielman plans to build this team. And that draft that he had, you're right, was absolutely key. Down to Khalil, a guy that, like I said, he's a first-round pick that we haven't talked about one bit, and in this case, that's a good thing.
And a big part, too, of how you're doing things when they did go into free agency, they committed some money to John Carlson. They ran into bad luck with Carlson when he sprains his knee, I think, the 3rd or 4th day of training camp. Never can get in the flow, misses the entire preseason, which, for a guy who sat out last season, remember how bad Jasper Brinkley looked in the first 2 or 3 preseason games?
Yep.
He was absolutely awful. He was able to take some steps forward throughout the course of that preseason.
Mail call.
And then, and that's the sort of thing you would expect John Carlson, you'd hope he could do as well. Whereas once you get into game weeks, once you get into the regular season, it's far more difficult for them to be giving John Carlson all the reps and trying to bring him along. They're going to go with guys they trust. But guys like Jerome Simpson, Jeff Schwartz, another guy who got hurt right away, missed the entire preseason after sitting out last season, and wasn't able to be what they thought he'd be. Jerome Simpson got hurt as well. They ran into some bad luck there, but they didn't tie up a bunch of money where it's going to impact them from a financial perspective or a cap perspective going forward. That's a big thing that they wanted to be able to do when you go back to last season and the money they committed to Remy Adele, Ryan Longwell, Eric Frampton. All those guys are gone. They weren't going to do that, and now you're not hanging on to anybody because, well, we committed this money to.
The previous thought process at Winter Park was to bring in free agents who are core guys. That's no longer the thought process. They supplement, and you know what? It would have been nice to get a vertical threat to know what Christian Ponder can and can't do.
Simpson may have been the guy if he's not hurt.
Right. No, but I'm saying it would have been nice to bring in more of a sure thing, okay?
Sure.
So I'm not giving Spielman a pass on this, but what I'm saying is this team is never going to build now. As long as Spielman's in charge of this team and the 53-man, they're not going to build through free agency. The Childress days of bringing guys in wholesale, paying a lot of money for those guys are gone. They're going to reward their own players. But this team deserves a lot of credit for what they've done, and you know what else it goes to? Alan Williams as well, defensive coordinator, first-year guy. He's a secondary coach for the Colts for, 10 years? He's a guy that we looked at and said, who is this, and what's he going to do? He's done a pretty nice job.
And I think that as he's gotten more comfortable with the defense, he's been able to employ more things, and it also helps when you're playing with the lead, because that really opens up what you're able to do from a blitzing perspective.
It's enormous.
He's Judd, I'm Tom. Full Vikings coverage, as always, at 1500ESPN.com. We will see you.